So good morning, everybody. So thank you so much for having accepted to be part of this online program that we organize from this association called Plataforma Fotografía and Imagen. So it's an association quite new that it was built in 2021 with this big and aim of promoting the creation of this so long awaited center or national center of photography in our country, in Spain. And so since then, and with the support of nowadays nearly like 9,000 members, we have succeeded in securing the creation of this center. And so we hope that it will really represent our diverse community, photographic community. So nowadays, although this future National Center of Photography is already in the hands of the Ministry of Culture, there's also a director that has been named, is Monica Carabias, that we wish her a very good journey in this long, awaiting work that she surely will have to deal with. But from the Plataforma, as we think we still are this representative of this living and plural ecosystem, we're still working in different directions. And one of them, we have made that for the last 2 years, we have been working really hardly in order to build a first website, the first Spain, first virtual photography portal that for us is a really very important instrument, not only for our community, but for a general also audience, in order to bring and to see all the different agents from different fields that they contribute to the development, to the dissemination, and to the preservation of photography in our country. And so from this context is where we decided to build this small program, this online program, because we really think it's very important to hear and also to give the visibility of what we think are essential voices of the photography field from different parts of the world. So from the Plataforma, we really wish to take the pulse of what is photography today and to reflect on the role also of the medium within our diverse society. And so we think that a very good way to do it is engaging with different leading international figures of photography institution, as you are, in a sense, a representative today. So what we want is to give to our audience, it's mainly Spanish, but also Latin American, to learn firsthand this different perspective, this different experience. And we want to open this kind of new window. I mean, with this website, we give the window about what is happening in the Spanish context. And now we want to give a small window what is happening in the international context. So thank you, the few of you to be with us this morning. You are the sort of representative of very different initiatives in Europe. So we have with us Fannie Escoulen. She's an independent curator, and she was also, and this is one of the things that interests us today, the former head of photography department of the Ministry of Culture in France. We have Claartje van Dijk. She's a senior curator of FOAM, so a very important institution dedicated to contemporary photography in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And we have also with us Mark Seeley, who is the director of Autograph, and he will explain to us what is this important, at least for us, organization dedicated also to photography in London, in United Kingdom. So what I'm going to give the voice to each of you in order to present, your institution, the work you do there, but also what do you think about the challenges of the photography ecosystem is today, and to really reflect on the current state of photography as a medium of expression, of archive, of visual thought, and also in the narratives of decolonial, perspective. So I give the voice first to Fannie Escoulen from France.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for the presentation. Nice to meet you all, and I'm really happy to participate to this very dynamic and encouraging platform. I will introduce myself in few words, and I wrote a text finally because it's more simple for me and to have my ideas more precise. So in few words, I currently work as an independent creator. I will maybe take a few minutes to share a bit about my background and give you an overview of how the photography ecosystem works in France. My path in photography has been shaped by many different experiences. One of the most important was in 2005 when I had a chance to create Le Bal in Paris with the former director of Magnum Photo, Diane Dufour. It was an extraordinary adventure. We literally built the institution from scratch, opened it in 2010 and launched its program, not knowing if the public would follow, but thankfully they did. After that chapter, I wanted to focus on more personal projects. For almost 7 years, I worked closely with photographers, publishers, and organizations to create awards, exhibitions, and books. Working so closely with artists really amplified my desire to give meaning and structure to the projects that matter to me, both in France and abroad. But also being an independent curator was quite precarious. And after COVID, I had to step away from that role. In 2021, I joined the Ministry of Culture, probably one of the only ministry in the world with a department entirely dedicated to photography within a division for the visual arts. We were just coming out of the pandemic and the sector was very fragile. But the state had mobilized exceptional support during the crisis and still had the means to continue helping artists. When I arrived, a major national photographic commission had just been launched, giving 200 photojournalists the opportunity to document post-COVID France. I'm convinced this project will remain a landmark in the history of French photography. During my 3 years at the ministry, I worked to defend photography while discovering how public policies actually works. In France, cultural decentralization is key. Of course, a lot happens in Paris, but regional cultural directorates play a crucial role in implementing national policy across the entire country. At that moment, the minister had just ordered a major report on the funding and production of photography. It proposed 35 measures, which became my roadmap. Our priorities included supporting author rights and professional status, encouraging creation and publishing, supporting women photographers, protecting photographic heritage, and developing visual literacy. We had 3 ministers in 3 years, but despite that instability, we managed to move things forward, especially through the Centre National des Arts Plastiques, the national public institution for the visual arts. I also realized how rich and diverse the photography network is across France. Festivals, art centers, publishers, but also how fragile many of them have become due to decreasing local funding. With all these experiences, I now have a broad strategic understanding of the photography ecosystem in France. It's a unique ecosystem, I think, one of the most supported in the world. It really began to develop in the 80s and 90s when photography became recognized as an art form, when dedicated galleries and publishers emerged, and when the first art centers opened. Today, France has more than 40 dedicated photography venues, over 50 festivals, nearly 60 publishers, and dynamic networks like Diagonal, Lux, and France Photobook. These organizations help the sector collaborate and innovate, even though most of them operate with very limited means. The major institutions like the Rencontre d'Arles, Visa pour l'Image in Perpignan, or the Jeux de Paume in Paris are exceptions. We also have more than 50 photography awards and numerous residencies, which offer essential recognition and production support. And in recent years, the ministry has pushed hard to ensure that artists are paid for the exhibition. The system is not perfect yet, but we have made significant progress in establishing this as a cultural norm. The press, however, remains a challenge. Many regional newspapers still don't systematically credit photographers, which often means they are not paid, basically. And with the social media and AI growing rapidly, this issue is likely to get worse. As for the market, France hosts one of the world's leading art fairs, Paris Photo, but French photographers still struggle to gain visibility internationally. They are often overshadowed by American, Asian, or South African artists whose galleries better position them on the global market. This is paradoxical given the strength of our ecosystem. I worked a lot on this issue at the ministry. Unlike in many European countries, national institutions do not always highlight the French scene as strongly as they should. We know that the market is driven by institutions. They confer legitimacy upon artists in the eyes of galleries and collectors. Regional venues play an important role, but major national institutions have been slower to promote French artists. It's starting to change, but there is still work to do. Another paradox. Photographic publishing has never been so active. France is probably the second strongest country in the world in the field after the United States. Yet our dynamic publishing scene ensures that French photography remains widely visible. But the landscape is darkening today because of the decrease in public funding as well. Publishers have also to create new models. Also, private art foundations have become more active, though few are dedicated specifically to photography, which shows also that photography still sits slightly apart from the contemporary art world. We also have in France several private companies that are strongly committed to supporting photography, like the Neuflis Foundation, BMW, Fnac, and brands such as Canon, Sony, Nikon, or Leica. And thanks to the 2003 sponsorship law, France has one of the best legal frameworks in the world for cultural patronage. It allows individuals or companies to benefit from a 60 to 66% tax deduction on their donation, which has greatly reinforced support for culture and for photography. On the other side, France has many photography schools, the École d'Arles, Louis Lumière, les Gobelins, as well as many art schools and universities offering strong photography programs. A great number of former students have become professionals, and many self-taught photographers enrich the scene as well. We can see that every time we launch a commission or a new award, we receive so many applications from young photographers, talented, inventive, and constantly rethinking how to present their work. So since the 80s, we can observe that photography has asserted itself as a major art form, and over 45 years, the ecosystem has constantly reinvented itself. But today we are facing worrying signs. The potential disappearance of institutions like the CNAP, public broadcasting, or the National Center for Cinema. Losing them will radically undermine decades of cultural policy. Funding is decreasing, venues are closing, and many professionals are exhausted. But I remain optimistic. We are lucky in France to have such a rich and well-supported ecosystem, even though it's increasingly difficult for photographers to make a living. Photography is a passion-driven vocation, and as long as that passion exists, I believe the field will continue to grow. And finally, as a last note, Nicéphore Niepce gave birth to photography in 1826 and offered it to the world. I worked for 3 years during my time at the ministry, on the celebration of this important anniversary in 2026. And I'm very delighted to see that major exhibitions will take place for this occasion, probably everywhere, because 200 years is not a small thing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Fanny. Thank you so much. I mean, for bringing us like this very quick but large, explanation on how France is working. And I think it's very helpful, at least for us, because from Spain we really have like this kind of a myth about, the big France, about what is going on, and to see also about what you have been and you're still struggling with, perhaps give us some. I don't know, different dynamic in order to understand also, that we're facing the same challenges everywhere. So, but perhaps we could just like proceed a little bit later after we hear everybody. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
So, so I'll give you now the voice to Claartje, so senior curator from FOAM, so a very dynamic and multifaceted institution in Amsterdam. You're also a curator, you have worked worldwide too. And now you're in this position in this particular institution. So here's your time for you, Claartje. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Claartje van Dijk. I am currently senior curator here at FOAM Photography Museum in Amsterdam. I was head of the exhibitions department until 2024. And then I felt that I wanted to focus more on content and really I felt I was able to make change more to really focus on exhibitions and programming rather than also more managerial tasks. So FOAM was founded 25 years ago in Amsterdam. And I'm glad to say that the institution has established itself and has a strong position within the field of photography. So we create exhibitions, we have public programming with a magazine and as a digital space. We provide a platform for conversation, really for contemplation, connection, not merely to just photography, which I think, I imagine we all agree on, but to our visual culture and the world around us. Of course, we live in a world saturated with images, and we feel we provide a guidance to sort of understanding the image. Also, it's important for us that we're not in it to sort of claim to have the answers, but rather to have a space, like a physical space, but also space for dialogue, to sort of go along for those who want to ask questions and who want to explore these questions that we place together with us. We very much believe that photography can bring people together and spark important, meaningful, in-depth conversations. And so we aim to have a physical place to discover, discuss, and engage in visual culture, which is also closely aligned with emerging trends, or rather, society around us in photography and the larger visual world. And we feel that our strength lies in signaling these developments that really form also the foundation of our programming. So as a core of, I want to give you a bit of an idea of how we actually come to our, in this case, our exhibitions, because I think it's important to sort of have an understanding of how the institution functions and what we think is important. So sort of people, I'm sure both of you might recognize that as well, that if you, like people ask, like, how do you come up with the programming, right? With so many artists and so many concepts. So we have sort of different starting points. And we have created 4 so-called like content pillars from which our exhibitions really use it as like a basis, sort of like a starting point. And I'll briefly mention those and sort of to then elaborate on the focus of the institution. So the first sort of content pillar is talent. I think a lot of people know FOAM also to scout and support emerging artists. So that's what we have been doing, and that's a very important part of what we embrace in our programming, but in our overall in our overall programming. The second one, which is relatively new, but now sort of in place for 2 years, 3 years, is what we call the unknown icons and untold stories, which questions basically the existing canon of photography, where obviously a lot of artists are underrepresented, not heard. And so we use this sort of line within our programming to explore who the artists, who the stories are that have been overlooked. And this is obviously to give a platform to a greater collection of unheard stories that we believe should be heard and should be given a platform. And then the third one is crowd favorites. Fannie, I thought you were very good also in giving an idea about also funding and sort of like what the state of photography. Well, for us, crowd favorites is one of those elements that is very important because although obviously content and what you show is very important, and at the same time we are an institution that is partly funded by the city, but not merely enough to support everything that we want to do. So for us, visitors are incredibly important, and therefore, the pillar crowd favorite to continue to awe and draw in the visitors that we all very much need. Then current events, which I guess speaks maybe for itself, which connects to the strong, engaging nature of what we do, a connection to topics that shape our world today. So these are the 4 pillars that sort of, as a red line, sort of are weaved throughout our programming. And every 4 years, we have different themes that make like a combination of focus, like content, where we focus on different content. Well, as I mentioned, and I will reiterate, is that at FOAM we provide a platform to think critically about how photography affects our lives. As I mentioned, photography as visual culture. Photos can comfort, tell stories, shape our identity, capture moments. But of course, there's also a darker component where imagery can spread fake news, promote unrealistic ideals, and fuel division. But as a medium that is a part of our visual culture, isn't just about images, we believe, but it's a system that shapes how we see the world today. And that is something that we take very seriously. And that also means that I think that photography museums and institutions hold an important responsibility to engage to their audience and provide a place, a venue, a presence to share these urgent stories throughout the world. Photography can both unite, divide, and we want to explore sort of the tension in times of conflict, polarization, and uncertainty. Conflict is always present in different forms, and recently, I think, like all public institutions, we have experienced that the audience is also more vocal about well, other than that it's a stance also, but I think you cannot ignore as a public institution what happens in the world around you. And the public has also become more vocal and demanding that museums, public institutions, to take a stance, and visual culture in that plays a very important role. And as an institution, we want to shed light on how conflict in particular, as it is so unfortunately omnipresent in our current society, we look at how it's represented and is spread, including topics as modern propaganda, algorithm-driven polarization, and fake images like deepfakes. So as part of our programming, and aim also, we want to share this changing media landscape where we think truth and empathy are sometimes really quite hard to find. So from that perspective, we organized, in addition to an exhibition, actually a pop-up exhibition here, we also organized the symposium Camera as a Weapon, which was an event focused on photography and conflict, and addressed both current events as well as long-term ongoing conflict, by showing and presenting artistic examples where the camera serves as what we call a weapon. And with the symposium, as well as with the exhibition, of course, but with the symposium as well, we wanted to create a more like a platform where there was a conversation and a moment for dialogue and to create understanding, or at least exchanging of different perceptions of reality, because obviously there is not one reality, and it's important to create a space for that. So that is one way to address contemporary issues for us, societal conflict, through exhibitions, while providing a more in-depth platform for conversation through public programming. Another impactful project that I think that I actually would want to mention here, to also reiterate the importance of how we look at the world, or how we use the world around us, and how visual culture affects everybody's life, is what we launched in 2024, which was photography through the lens of AI. And here we looked at the influence of AI in photography, and we sort of seized the moment where we had two exhibitions. We had a thematic issue of Foam magazine, and we presented an online exhibition on our digital platform. And we didn't really wanted to focus. I mean, obviously, we wanted to focus on AI because obviously it's such an important element of our daily life, and everybody is affected by it. But we also wanted to explore the evolving boundaries of photography and give insight in these new technologies that blur the line between real and computer-generated images. And as cameras capture the world beyond human vision, Foam wants to highlight the need to understand how photography as a technological development shapes our view of the world, which again affects everybody today. So these are all examples to give you an idea how social significance in this time is a key motivation behind the artistic programming that Foam creates. In the latest Foam magazine, where we celebrate our 25 years anniversary, I wrote an essay, Building Bridges, where I argue that cultural institutions hold an urgent and important responsibility to share the stories that are often unheard and unseen, but can shift and shape perspectives. And by giving them and these artists a platform, we build a bridge of insight and perhaps a better understanding of topics, each other, society as a whole. And as a place of institutional recognition, I think photography museums play an important role, museums as well as other institutions. But they play an important role to give these artists that may not be seen as much this visibility. I think there's a great responsibility to show these artists whose perspective are often overlooked, and for challenging also misrepresentations. I mentioned before, of course, the unknown icons and the untold stories, which was implemented in 2023. And that really also, I think, underlines our belief in the urgency, also in questioning history and the photographic canon, but also the urgency and the quality of these unheard stories and voices, and our commitment to sharing these stories and these artists widely. I think it's the duty of us, or perhaps even of public institutions as a whole, to ensure that stories that are lesser known, and artists that are lesser known, that we program and that are shared, that they offer the opportunity to reshape our discourse, and to intervene and to widen the perspective of visual, our visual culture, but even a society as a whole. And to conclude, I think in a world shaped and saturated with images, our ambition is to be pioneer, or to continue to find new ways in a future that is ever evolving, ever changing, culturally, socially, and technologically. I wanted to leave it at that, even though I feel there's a lot also that I didn't touch upon, but perhaps we can do that in a little bit with additional questions. And
thank you so much, Claartje. I mean, it's
thank you.
A brilliant presentation in order to, I mean, for perhaps an audience that perhaps do not know about FOAM, to understand, as you perfectly explained, to be this space in order to question, image and the big responsibility in it, to re-question what visual culture means, and to be constructed, as I say, as a guidance of how, without giving answer about how photography and visual culture is working and how it shapes our society. So thank you very, very much. Yeah, I think it was very interesting to see how it works and what you point as an institution that I think it's quite important for us in our small ecosystem. Yeah. So now it's I'll give the voice to Mark Seeley, who is also a curator, writer, and editor, and professor, and who has really worked in this relation between art, photography, social change, identity, race, and human rights. And with been and the head of this for List, a very important institution who has bring different representation, different visual stories, so important in our small Occidental way of seeing the world. So yeah, this is the time for you to explain to us of this incredible project that you still fight for, and also what you think about the challenges of this medium. So this is your time, Mark.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for the invitation to speak today. It's always a pleasure to be invited into the conversation, which I think takes us to the very core of the business. Is like, who's invited into the conversation, who gets to speak. I mean, first of all, I'm going to say, with regards to photography and its presentation and support, I think both Holland and France have been exceptional in many ways. So in terms of Britain, I think I would just say holistically, we're very far behind in terms of understanding the importance of photography. And we have to remember that basically it's something like 2007, 2008 before Tate, as a major museum, employs a photography curator. And that's just not that long ago. So that's where we are in the grand scheme of understanding the impact of photography within the cultural sector and its values. So autograph really is a kind of a different thing altogether in many ways, because we're now 36 years old, and we come out of a very particular kind of British conjuncture, but with a kind of global pan post-colonial kind of narrative across the work that we've been doing. I think essentially, the idea of thinking about race, rights, and representational politics at a very particular time of Thatcherism in Britain was actually quite critical. The political kind of the political kind of need for what we were doing, and need is the wrong word. The political fight for representation was actually, at the cost of people's lives. So it's really quite frontline work, and I can't emphasize that enough. I've often said that our organization is not forged out of a kind of space of cultural need. It's actually forged out of riot. So it was actually fought for on the streets of Brixton, Liverpool, Leeds, because of what was happening within mainstream media representations of the Black body and the state's treatment of the Black subject. Lots of artists of my generation were leaving university in the early 80s. We were a first generation of migrant kids coming out of school with degrees. We understood the nature of public funding, and we were paying our taxes. And we wanted to see some of those taxes filtered back into the types of stories and life experiences that have been historically and continuously, in many instances, ignored. So autograph becomes a kind of collective voice, if you like, for an association of Black photographers. And it's a phone and a desk in Brixton, and it's basically funded on a very, very small amount of money, with the idea that it's an advocacy body, basically born out of contestation. And the Arts Council at that time in the UK did have a photography officer, a very enlightened guy called Barry Lane, where there were small independent photography spaces in Newcastle, Side Gallery, sadly now closing, in Bradford, the Impressions Gallery, in Leeds, in Liverpool. There were all these small community-like darkroom spaces, because photography in the UK was seen as a kind of radical space of alternative left-wing conversations. Photography was not part of the kind of dominant, what we might call museum space. Photography, film, independent radio, and the kind of live music scene, i.e. the kind of punk world, were all part of the same constellation that left-wing local authorities were supporting as part of community engagement. And photography darkroom spaces were really important for those interconnectivities. This is the space where people like Joe Spence come out of, Sunil Gupta come out of. The fact that people were able to have affordable access to creative processes were really part of that space. And the Arts Council were inherently funding that. So we're born out of this very particular kind of political ecosystem, and photography and autograph is part of that space. Of course, then, the struggle to move towards institution, towards agency, towards development is a structural thing. We have to learn the kind of politics of survival. We don't simply inherit an institutional space. We're reliant on our academics, people like Stuart Hall, Paul Gilroy, Kubina Mercer, Lola Young. We're learning from American scholars like Bell Hooks, Henry Louis Gates. We're learning about how to build things, and it's not surprising that part of our initial relationship, our transatlantic conversations, were to do with our North American colleagues, learning what a Black arts movement might be able to do. And also thinking, that it's very important that we do challenge the institutional absences from the very beginning. And that really has been quite difficult work, to be honest. It's been, people in spaces, in institutions who are, have job titles like directors or senior posts, really don't like to be told about the absences in their spaces. And actually, truth be known, up until around about the first 10 years of our work, it was seen as like, let's do something for these poor communities and we might give them a small space in a place. It was very patronizing in many instances. But actually, one of the things I realized that the thing to do with our agenda was to not look at the UK. We were already thinking about how does this work outside of our own borders. So we did an awful lot of work in places like France. Revue Noire, Simon Nunjami, and the magazine were very, very important to us. They were publishing our work as early as 1992. Francois Bell in France, was really important to us. We had great conversations with people at Magnum, and we did an audio visual in the amphitheater in something like 1993, and it was called Rencontres au Noir. We were in Bamako. I think I was the only British person in Bamako in 1994, watching the explosive moment where Malik Sidibé, Seydou Keita, Samuel Fosso, all that stuff arrives. It was really interesting what was happening in France at that time. So we were learning about the whole kind of, Pan-African movement through these interconnected, I might call, tectonic plates that were rubbing off each other. Really, really, Francois Huguier, people like this were friends of ours, right? These were people simply not known in the UK because the UK was in a kind of cultural backwater. So this idea of amplifying what this space was of, Black British photography was really important. But at the same time, we're having to negotiate, giving people like Gordon Parks. You mentioned camera as a weapon. We gave Gordon Parks his first exhibition in the UK. Gordon Parks in 1994 had not had an exhibition in the UK. Absolutely tragic. And it wasn't only just an exhibition in the UK, it was the smallest possible space in the Photographers Gallery in London at that time. People were selling sandwiches and coffee while looking at vintage prints of Gordon Parks' work. Outrageous. We were the first people to give Daoubei's show in the UK. So what we were beginning to doing is really bringing in very undeniably important people from overseas, and then at the same time exporting our work in places like Photo Fest 1992. As I said, our various festivals. We were working in Rotterdam with Fritz and a major show around Black British presences. There was a kind of European sense that we need to learn from these histories around marginalization and representational fields. So we've always been an international space, but also we were thinking about Blackness as a political space, not to do with someone's skin color, but to do with the way that you think, right? And that's really important for us because it's those voices. And if you're going to be a kind of cultural gatekeeper or cultural activist in those spaces, you have to be able to unhinge the things that you think you know and allow those other people to teach you what can be done through the lens of the authoritative spaces that you occupy. That's about arguing for spaces to be open and inclusive, and to fundamentally not always have the answers if you're a curator to the things that you know. Time and time again, you're having a conversation with a curator who can't finish a conversation without sharing their knowledge with you, instead of just saying, thank you very much, I'm learning from you, and I can actually build that into our audience. We realized actually as we were beginning to grow through these fields, exhibitions, residencies, publishing, and of course, major exhibitions in those fields, both ambitious and very small, local and global became our kind of buzzwords in that sense, thinking about things nationally and regionally, but at the same time, recognizing through our diasporic networks that we're more than the sum of the borders of who we are. So these ideas are still very important to us. We began to think about moving towards institution, moving towards what it might mean to own a building. And these are some of the things that became very important for us, because it's precarious business trying to build something from the ground up. And that it's going to be an economic challenge going forward to think about what institution is. But we then began to realize that if we don't do that, then the museums aren't collecting the work, aren't looking after people's estates, aren't capable of building new collections around this work. So now part of where we've evolved into is the collection work is very important. It's some of the things that we've collected now have become, of course, highly valued artist works. Guggenheim have purchased from us recently. Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art. You know, these things were not valued back in the day. Now they're highly sought. This is what the longevity of the game of autograph has kind of proved to us. So having a purpose-built building, although I would argue they're a real challenge, became a kind of statement around permanence, that these ideas are not ephemeral. They won't just pop up and go away, that we wanted to make sure that these other histories, these connected networks, whether it's from Bangladesh, whether it's from India, whether it's from Uruguay, or whether it's from Brazil. We did the first contemporary Brazilian show in London in something like 1998. So there's been many, many firsts that we've been pushing through the door in terms of understanding queer histories, black feminist perspectives, you know, Black activists with cameras, just thinking really about, as you rightly say, challenging the canon and pushing through the narratives, but working with art, but also working with artists who are similar in mind. People like Omar Victor Diop, Bruno Bougelal, you know, Ito Barada. These are all artists that have had very important commissions from us in terms of working. So it's never really been about a national space. It's been about a space of connectivity and new identity formations. And what I would call alliances are really important. Of course, we come from somewhere, but we're all connected in that kind of global diasporic space where these conversations can happen. I'm interested, of course, in, you know, French Algerian photographers like Didier Benloulou and his understanding of Jerusalem, because we have to understand these different places because we're connected to them, whether we like it or not. So we are kind of, I'm very concerned about when we talk about what might be a national space, because if we're not careful, we lock down into kind of national borders. And I'm very open to the idea of again, just using like photographies as global connected conversations. You know what I mean? And allowing both indigenous voices to happen and at the same time championing people who have an empathy, although I'm very critical of the word empathy, have understandings or desires or facilities to help amplify voices that have been like silenced. So this idea, so I'm not interested, and also politically and culturally for me personally, I've often said, I'm not interested specifically in the history of photography, although I understand that's very important. That's for another institution to do. What I'm interested in right now in this time is what's the work photography can do and continues to do in culture. And also who's able to read its past, its histories, and its presence, and how and what kind of intellectual inquiries we can open up into this field, which I believe is increasingly important to everybody as I watch my children swipe through their phones, if we watch the impact of how people are seen, if the consciousness of the image, I would argue now we're at this point where the image might have finally won the game of the word, if you like. It's kind of more important than what we say. What we see, what we feel through what we see is almost becoming more important. So I think we're at this very, very important conjuncture. So in short, if I'm going to think about a new community or a new institution for photography, especially in Spain maybe, or in any other place, I'm thinking this is an opportunity to stop doing the things we've done in the past. This is an opportunity to say we can build something new that is actually globally connected, that is open and capable of offering up a new kind of conversations or new dialogues around the work that photography does in culture.
Thank you so much, Mark. I mean, well, in fact, I mean, I can't be more agree about what you're saying about, like, you know, that for me at least, also image and cultural visual is it's a way of connecting, you know, and it has always been of knowing ourselves and knowing the others, and to be alliances, you know, that finally you say. So yeah, I don't know where this future center of photography will come through. At least from our small side, we what we really want is to be in this conversation that it's all constantly moving.
as you perfectly explained, as you started also defending, and where we are standing today, and this is the most important. I mean, finally, just like to be in this, to be I mean, we are interconnected, and this is a huge network, and this is the one that I think has to be reinforced in a sense. I don't know if you perhaps would like to react to some things that have been said.
I just want to respond to Mark, because I thought it was really interesting what you said about how, and then I'm speaking, I think you specifically spoke about curators, but perhaps people who create programming, directors, the importance of listening and sort of exactly opening, being open rather than being ready to sort of share the knowledge, reality, facts of oneself, and I think that is the key, right, to sort of expand your own ideas, because I think I think actually that's one of the most important things, because if you don't, and if you are there to sort of embrace a concept, an idea, a theory, a philosophy that is sort of set in stone, like however can you create something for the future that needs to be flexible for change. Anyway, I thought that was a really interesting reference that you made. And other than that, I think, of course, I didn't really elaborate on sort of the Dutch climate on funding, but yeah, I mean, I think we're all in it together, as in like it's everywhere, right? We're all dealing with right-ish governments, fundings that are being cut or minimized. I think compared to some other institutions, perhaps it's our advantage that we've always had limited funding, and so we've always been we always had to draw in visitors as well, and sort of expand on how to connect to people and to listeners, readers. So I think we've always embraced like an entrepreneurial approach to what needs sort of towards visual culture and photography, and how to bring across the ideas that we have and the stories that we want to share. But definitely the political climate is painful, and then I think actually I think in France, but in the Netherlands also, of course, we have various photography institutions that do very important work. I mean, in Den Haag, Dijk, Rotterdam, but also Fotodoc in Utrecht. I think there's a lot happening that do good for photography and visual culture as a whole, I think. That's sort of as an addition as well. And I think, Fannie, that was a very it was a really interesting insight also, sort of about the development, and also the importance of the Sandra, as you call it so nicely, the photographic ecosystem, and what has happened over the past years. I think it's interesting to see all these different perspectives also, like globally, and that you give an opportunity to hear all these different voices together, and how there's also a lot of overlap in the sense of, like, if we talk about like how is the arts doing, really? I mean, in the end, it's not the main funding source, and yet I also feel I don't know how you feel about that, but I do feel that overall, like societal engagement is, I mean, obviously, Mark, you have been like, you have really been a pioneer within photography, but also just like as an organization in itself. And I feel today more, you know, even museums, like also more like, you know, bigger institutions, like bigger like museums embrace this importance of social engagement, because you have to in this day and age, especially in time where exactly what you're saying, like the image has won. I mean, the importance of photography, I think, is clear, even though it might not be recognized as such, as to the extent that I think it should be acknowledged. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three of you have talked about, you know, responsibility, you know, the huge responsibility. Do you feel that, I mean, for sure this has evolved, but do you feel like it's more in a urgency nowadays? I mean, how will you explain about that?
I don't think it's never been urgent. I think that this is what I mean. I don't think you can ever afford to be comfortable, because just when you feel as though things have been comfortable, what I've learned over, say, like 30 odd years is that things change. They really do. Whether it's an economic crisis, we open up a new building in 2007, there's an economic crisis in 2008. We end up with 14 years of like conservative rule. You know, the migrants are coming when everyone's feeling, you know, like thing. Then there's a war in Europe. Then there's a war in Gaza. Then there's we are in really precarious times. It's just the fact of the matter. I think the only thing that I'm thinking about now is ideas of alliance and new formations of partnerships. The economies are what's great about when the economy is tight is that people actually in our positions become more open to sharing, because they need to think about partnerships. When museums are feeling really wealthy and really rich and really well endowed, they end up having, what I would call the Prada parade arrives, right? It's like everyone's all dressed up and it's a wonderful night of champagne and everyone's feeling super rich. Big red carpets up the wall and fantastic graphics everywhere. And everyone actually forgets where and what we're doing. So I've never really had the luxury of feeling comfortable or wealthy or that these times have changed. We are always mindful. I think as a cultural institution or someone thinking about our world, I use this metaphor for any institution really. It is like driving a car. You've got the windscreen, you've got a rear view mirror, and you've got the left and you've got the right wing mirrors. And you cannot go forward in any shape or form without having the capacity to look through all of those lenses at the same time. And each one of them at any given time will offer you a moment of kind of caution to be aware in how you maneuver. That's really, really, really important for me. The other thing as well is that it's if I'm going to open up a new cultural institution now, I'm just thinking about where you are, is that people also have to allow things to happen. When we were talking in Paris, you've got like 900 members. Now they're either an asset or they're a pain in the butt, right? Because when you've got this kind of like collective voice of a lot of people, they can stagnate the whole thing by making ridiculous demands. So I think manifesto is really important. Mission is really important. Clear directives about what's your let's just say 5-year plan. What do you want to, you can't just say photography is really important and we want to support it. We've got lots of people and it's really there. We've got this really important history. It's like, what do you want to do? What's the mission? What do you want to achieve in those milestones? So don't just open up a new museum and say, hey, this is great for photography. It's like, what's it going to do? It might decide, for example, to radically collect only women photographers for the first 5 years, right? That's a good mission to start with. Like, think about those absences. It might decide to collect photographers who simply don't live in either Barcelona or Madrid or any other kind of capital city. It might decide to look at those regional voices and bring them into a central space. So I think mission statements and then reviewing those mission statements and thinking about a delivery plan is really, really important. And that's for you guys or everybody to decide what their mission is, because otherwise you drift. This is important, that's important. Everything's important in many ways, but we can only, one of the things I try and do at Autograph is like incremental paces going forward. For example, we realized that after about 25 years, we had done very little to talk about the representation of disabled people through the lens of photography, and especially thinking about disabled people in the context of racial politics. We hadn't done that work. So once we realized that, we went on a mission to change that. And now we have special education need programs. We've given a disabled artist their first one-person show. We've published, publications. We've broadened the dynamic around that. And that's like, we decided as a team that that's something that we needed to address. Now that's embedded within our organizational DNA.
Sandra, I will have to leave you in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Just to add maybe something. I think it's, maybe you are in a moment also super exciting for you guys in Spain, because finally you will reach this point of creating this National Center for Photography that both of you dream since several years. But as Mark's saying, I think you definitely should learn from the other country and from what's going on, particularly in Europe, maybe I don't know elsewhere, but in the format or in the models also, because as I explained in France, in this fast period of the 80s, 90s. Well, we were so lucky to have new art centers, festival, growing up everywhere on the territory. It was incredible. But today, 40 years after, we can see also that many of them are almost dying because finally they don't have a penny to continue their mission. So I think it's really important now to observe what is the landscape. For example, in France, but I don't know elsewhere. I don't know that much. But what is working, what is not working, and of course the philosophy, the mission, the manifesto is so important. But also the model, the economic model also, and not wanted to make everything a collection, exhibitions, and visual literacy and. Because sometimes we want to be everywhere on. So I will.
Can I just say something really quickly? I think that's a really important economic model, but sometimes the economic model really surprises us. So I was at Labal the other day speaking with Diane, and there's a show on there, 2 queer artists. People say there's not an audience for that kind of work. There's 2,000 people a week going through that.
Yeah, of course.
And it's really those models of investing in.
But the model of Global, I know very well.
I know. And I'm just saying it's a really successful.
It's not the tickets. The model of Global is having 20 or 25 private partners, and it's such exhausting. And because the foundation of Global is not so strong, because the public partners are not so present.
Exactly.
It's also a very fragile model, but I know that the model, we can invent it also by working.
No, I agree 1000%, but it's a model that is still there after 20 odd years. It's still happening, and it's doing really, really good work. And it's never not going to be precarious, because that's the nature of the kind of funding game. But what we've also learned, just to add to the conversation, is data now for us is really important. We know who our audience is. We know that we know that something like, I think it's 29% of our audience recognize themselves as neurodiverse. That's incredible, right? We know that 52% of our audience would call themselves Black in some shape or form. They're incredible kind of like numbers. We know that something like 48% of those people are under the age of 35. And we also know that when you do the archive, it's like people just, all those absent stories, like those studio portraits, those vernacular albums, those things that people are really connected to, that they never get to see, are hugely popular shows. And then that's got to impact on not me, the curator, and what I think is important, but how your organization learns to respond to those those data profiles that are coming through. And then it helps you build community in totally different ways.
Yeah, I mean, in order like to be explained, you know, what we try from our association is really, you know, to be sharing these ideas. You know, we are not in the plans of what is going to be. You know, it's just like we think that it's an important time in Spain because of what we said, and you reinforce this idea of alliances, because for 40 years there have been a lot of things happening in all Spain, and this is what we gave with this tool of the website, in order to see that it happens everywhere in Spain, like small organizations to big ones that are really working, you know, isolated way. Of bringing, you know, the preservation or the diffusion of the knowledge and the sharing of what photography and visual culture means. And so what we only try to do is so like to steal in this conversation, to give the visibility of this important network, and to still end this conversation of this important network. What we'd like to sort of become is sort of I don't know if nowadays makes sense to be a sort of a syndicate, you know, a syndicate in order like to preserve the rights of the photography collective, in order to reinforce their rights, as you know, Fannie has explained, like just like giving them just like their heart in festivals that they are not paid. So, I mean, we are the voice for the ministry and for the public institution to say, we are here, we're not alone, we are all together, in order to give like strength to the voices, and not to be a single voice, but to be this multicultural voice and plural voice from all around in the different parts of Spain, in order to have the conversation between us, and also through this incredible medium that is talking about circulation. So we are in the circulation of knowledge, of visual culture, and this is what we try to defend, and that's why we had this invitation to you three, that I thank you so much again for sharing all your knows and your knowledge, and for sure, I mean, we're still in this conversation for long, and we're still learning from each of you and from so many people through this incredible medium. So thank you to the three of you.